United Africa Defense Force, a strategic imperative for continental prosperity. Hello, my name is Steve Arika. I'm the project director for the Ndege group. Here today we are talking about the United Africa Defense Force, the cost of fragmentation in Africa. Distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, leaders of industry and defense. Africa forfeits $150 billion annually to conflict, illicit flows, and trade disruption. Border disputes and inefficient security corridors reduce regional GDP by 1 to 2% each year. That's roughly between 40 to 80 billion euros in lost growth that never materializes, never builds schools, never creates jobs, never feeds families. Over 40 million Africans have been displaced, shrinking consumer markets and diverting public funds from health, education, and infrastructure into emergency response. The question isn't whether we can afford unified continental defense. It's whether we can afford another decade without it. Why now is not negotiable. We stand at a moment of extraordinary possibility and imminent risk. The African Continental Free Trade Area creates a 3.4 trillion market, larger than India's economy, nearly as large as Germany's. On paper, we are the world's fastest growing consumer market, the youngest demographic, the richest mineral reserves. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange, with the market capitalization exceeding 1.2 trillion euros, rivals major global exchanges in scale and sophistication. Safaricom's M-Pesa in Kenya processes nearly 300 billion euros in annual transactions, demonstrating that African financial infrastructure already operates at continental scale with remarkable efficiency. Lagos has become a magnetic force for foreign direct investment, attracting over 1.2 billion euros in digital economy investments alone, with substantial capital flowing into technology, finance, and fast-moving consumer goods. The city exemplifies what happens when infrastructure meets ambition. Global manufacturers like Kellogg's, Colgate-Palmolive, and Dangote Industries establish continental operations, creating thousands of jobs and billions in economic activity. But without security integration, the African Continental Free Trade Area is merely paperwork filed in Geneva, whilst armed groups control actual trade routes. The African Development Bank's 2025 Economic Outlooks projects our continent's economy will accelerate from 3.3% growth in 2024 to 3.9% in 2025, reaching 4% in 2026. 21 African countries will achieve growth exceeding 5% in 2025. East Africa leads with projected 5.9% growth driven by resilience in Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Tanzania. This is not aspiration. This is momentum. Yet this expansion phase arrives precisely when we face the greatest security challenges of the modern era. The window to build unified defense infrastructure is in the next 3 years. After that, fragmented security arrangements will calcify into permanent barriers. National defense budgets will be unlocked into legacy procurement contracts. Regional rivalries will harden into structural obstacles. We either integrate security now, whilst political will, institutional momentum, and global capital alignment make it possible, or we repeat another decade of missed potential, whilst watching other regions capture the opportunities that should be ours. The choice isn't whether to build the unified African Defense Force. It's whether we build it deliberately or watch fragmentation make it impossible. African models already delivering results. We are going to talk about the proof of concept. We present the United African Defense Force not as a theoretical exercise, but as a scalable extension of proven African security cooperation models that are already generating measurable returns. One example is the Multinational Joint Task Force. Operating across the Lake Chad Basin, spanning Cameroon, Chad, Niger Republic, Nigeria, and Benin, this force has reduced Boko Haram's operational territory by 60%. The result? Revival of agriculture and trade previously devastated regions. Cross-border commerce resumed, fishing industries recovered. Markets reopened. Regional foreign direct investment increased by nearly 18% following security stabilization, according to the African Development Bank analysis from 2023. Another example we have is the Southern African Development Community mission in Mozambique. The SADC deployment to stabilize Cabo Delgado province secured over 60 billion euros in liquefied natural gas investment. What was a no-go zone for international capital is now Africa's largest natural gas development, with Total Energies, ExxonMobil, and Eni committing multi-decade project timelines. Security integration directly unlocks investment at scale. The example we're going to focus on again is the Kenya-Rwanda Security Pact. This 2025 bilateral defense cooperation, which occurred sometime in Q4 of this year, intelligence sharing agreement provides demonstrable proof that defense integration boosts investor confidence along critical trade corridors. Cross-border security coordination reduced cargo insurance premiums by 12% on the Mombasa-Kigali route. Two nations proving concept beyond continental scale. The last example is the African Union Logistics Base in Djibouti. This facility provides foundational rapid deployment infrastructure, reducing external dependency and enabling African-led crisis response. It represents continental capability that doesn't require calling Washington, Paris, or Beijing when crisis erupts. Where security cooperation exists, economic activity accelerates. What clear pattern can we draw out from this? Fragmentation persists, potential remains theoretical. We are going to go to the next level of global precedents, which are shown integrated security as an economic prerequisite. History demonstrates with uncomfortable clarity that collective defense precedes sustained economic integration. No major regional economic bloc has succeeded without security architecture. Let's analyze the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in Europe. NATO's security umbrella was the non-negotiable foundation for the European Union's single market. Most post-war European integration began with the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951. But economic acceleration required NATO's 1949 establishment first. The result? Over 500 billion euros in annual cross-border investment within the European Union, enabled by security predictability that allows 30-year infrastructure planning and multi-generational investment horizons. Economic integration without security integration is aspiration without foundation. We move on to Asia. The ASEAN grouping. The ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus framework secured maritime routes critical for regional commerce. By reducing piracy and territorial disputes, shipping insurance costs declined 8 to 12%, directly impacting trade competitiveness. The result? 220 billion euros in foreign direct investment attracted to ASEAN in 2023, with security predictability cited by 73% of surveyed investors as critical or very important, according to the trade organization under the UN analysis from 2024. Secure trade routes aren't luxury. They are prerequisite for competitive manufacturing and export-led growth. Another example is in the Middle East, under the GCC umbrella. The Peninsular Shield Force, established in 1984, provides internal stability underpinning 100 billion euros in annual intra-GCC trade. Beyond direct military capacity, the force signals coordination that reinforces sovereign credit ratings and attracts patient capital. GCC nations maintain investment-grade credit ratings despite geopolitical volatility. Because investors trust collective defense architecture, reduce systemic risk. Unified security frameworks reduce transactional risk, creating predictability that long-term capital demands. The universal truth? Economic blocs don't create security arrangements after prosperity arrives. They build security architecture first, then prosperity follows. The value proposition of the United African Defense Force, converting fragmentation cost into integration dividend. The United African Defense Force delivers quantifiable return on investment across 4 strategic pillars. The first pillar being economic confidence and capital attraction. Unified defense reduces sovereign risk premiums, improves creditworthiness, and signals institutional coordination. The mechanism is straightforward. Investors price risk into every decision. Fragmented security equals elevated risk. Integrated security equals reduced premiums. The impact is substantial, lowering borrowing costs for infrastructure development by even half a percentage point saves nearly 3 to 9 billion euros annually across continent on existing debt service. More importantly, it attracts high-quality foreign direct investment focused on long-term value creation rather than short-term resource extraction. It unlocks the full investment potential of the African Continental Free Trade Area by ensuring physical security matches policy ambition. We move on to the second pillar, critical asset protection. Africa's infrastructure investments remain vulnerable to disruption that can paralyze entire regional economies. Ports, railways, energy grids, undersea data cables, these aren't merely assets, they are the circulatory systems of continental commerce. The United African Defense Force solution provides dedicated protection protocols for continental infrastructure, ensuring operational integrity of trade networks, energy systems, and digital connectivity. The economic value becomes clear when you calculate the cost of failure. Every day of port shutdown costs the regional economy between 50 to 200 million euros. Railway disruption compounds exponentially. Grid failures cascades across borders. Asset protection isn't military luxury, it's economic necessity. You move on to the third pillar, fiscal efficiency through integration. 54 African nations each maintain separate defense procurement, logistics, training, and command structures. The duplication is staggering and quantifiable. Joint procurement, shared logistics, coordinated training, and unified rapid deployment capacity would generate estimated savings of 10 to 15 billion euros annually through elimination of procurement duplication, shared logistic infrastructure, and coordinated training programs, according to the African Union Peace Fund analysis from 2024. This creates a reinvestment opportunity of historic proportions, freed capital redirected to health systems, education, infrastructure, sectors that generate actual GDP growth rather than simply defending against GDP loss. We move to the fourth pillar, technology and innovation catalyst. The United African Defense Force vision creates defense-led research and development hubs with civilian applications across information and communications technology, engineering, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing. The president is proven globally. The United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency creates Global Positional System, GPS, the Internet, and microprocessors. Israel's military research spawned its cybersecurity industry. China's defense innovation drives civilian technology advancement. What is the African opportunity? Continental defense research and development capacity building a 21st century African industrial base, reducing technology dependence whilst creating export competitive sectors. Technology sovereignty that positions Africa as innovation creator, not merely technology consumer. The African Sovereign Development Trust financing model, from a donor dependency to strategic self-reliance. The United Africa Defense Force will be capitalized through the innovative asset-backed model of the African Sovereign Development Trust, moving beyond donor dependency to strategic self-reliance. The fundamental shift is philosophical before it becomes financial. The old model required waiting for donor grants, accepting conditionalities, remaining perpetually dependent on external financing decisions made in capitals far from African realities. The African Sovereign Development Trust model leverages Africa's collective mineral wealth, strategic land reserves, and resource assets to issue sovereign-backed instruments that capitalize our own development and security infrastructure. Here's a concrete example of strategic asset deployment. The Democratic Republic of Congo holds approximately 70% of global cobalt reserves, critical minerals for electric vehicle batteries, renewable energy storage, and the global technology transition. Under the African Sovereign Development Trust model, sovereign-backed security bonds leverage a percentage of future cobalt extraction royalties to capitalize continental defense infrastructure. The security infrastructure then protects the mining operations, transport corridors, and export routes that generate the royalties funding the security. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Security enables extraction, extraction funds security, and security enables more extraction. This is not debt, this is strategic asset deployment. This is not borrowing against the future. This is investing present resources into infrastructure that multiplies future returns. This is not dependence, this is sovereignty. The transformation is profound. Defense financing fuses with development financing. Security transforms from budget expenditure into value-appreciating continental asset. Military capability becomes investment-grade infrastructure that generates measurable economic returns. The outcome, defense and development are no longer competing priorities. They become integrated components of unified prosperity strategy. The implementation pathway, a phased approach which is pragmatic and results-driven. We propose deliberate result-driven consolidation, building confidence and demonstrating value at each phase. In phase 1, we are looking at a pilot integration that will take nearly 3 years from 2025 to 2028. The objective is harmonizing existing bilateral and regional security pacts under a unified African Union operational doctrine. Focus areas include the Kenya-Rwanda Pact expansion, multinational joint task force operational coordination enhancement, the SADC mission standardization protocols, and shared intelligence architecture. Success metrics are concrete: 20% reduction in cross-border security incidents, 15% decrease in trade corridor insurance premiums, and measurable improvement in regional investment confidence indices. This is proof of concept. Demonstrate that integration delivers tangible economic benefits, not just military coordination. We move on to phase 2, regional consolidation, from 2028 to 2032. Integrate East African Community, the Southern African Development Community, the Economic Community of West African States, and other regional economic community security missions into unified rapid response command structure. Focus on standardized equipment procurement, reducing costs through scale, joint training facilities, and doctrine. Integrated logistics and supply chains and coordinated maritime security for coastal trade routes. Success metrics: 5 to 8 billion euros annual savings through procurement efficiency. 48-hour rapid deployment capacity across any regional emergency, and 25% reduction in regional security incidents requiring external intervention. Institutional confidence builds regional success, creates foundation for continental expansion. Phase 3 of the project will include Continental Assembly, which will run from 2032 to 2035. Ratifying United African Defense Force Charter and establish permanent standing Continental Defense Command. Structure includes African Union mandated Continental Force, rotating command among regional blocks, permanent secretariat and logistics infrastructure, and joint procurement authority. What are the success metrics? A fully operational continental rapid deployment capacity, continental security infrastructure protecting all African continental free trade area trade corridors, and measurable improvement in Africa's aggregate sovereign credit ratings. Strategic milestones achieved would look like Africa possesses defense capability independent of external military powers. We move on to phase 4, sovereign capitalization from 2035 onwards. Launch of the United African Defense Force Sovereign Fund under the African Sovereign Development Trust framework, ensuring permanent, self-sustaining financing independent of annual budget appropriations or donor commitments. Mechanisms includes asset-backed security instruments, resource royalty-linked bonds, Continental Infrastructure Investment Vehicle, and technology commercialization revenues from defense research and development. What is the outcome? A united defense force becomes self-financing through the prosperity it enables, creating a virtuous cycle of security, investment, growth, and reinvestment. The age of artificial intelligence and strategic partnerships. We stand at the threshold of the artificial intelligence revolution, and Africa must position itself not as a passive recipient of technology, but as an active architect of its application. The United African Defense Framework integrates emerging technologies across all operational domains. Machine learning enhances threat detection and predictive security analytics. Autonomous systems extend surveillance capabilities across vast territories. Quantum-resistant cryptography protects continental communications infrastructure. Satellite networks provide indigenous Earth observation and secure connectivity. We are committed to partnering with initiatives that share our vision of African technological sovereignty. Programs like Elevate Africa, which focuses on digital transformation and entrepreneurship across the continent, align perfectly with our strategic objectives. The UADF can provide the security architecture that enables digital infrastructure to flourish, whilst digital innovation enhances our security capabilities. This symbiotic relationship between security and technology creates the conditions for exponential growth. When African entrepreneurs can build without fear of disruption, when digital infrastructure operates with guaranteed protection, when innovation zones receive dedicated security protocols, the result is acceleration of technological adoption at continental scale. The clear choice before us. Distinguished delegates, the choice before us is not complicated, though its implications are profound. If we choose one path to continue fragmented security architecture that perpetuates high-risk premiums, stunted growth, and perpetual vulnerability, we maintain 54 separate defense structures, duplicating costs, limiting capabilities, and leaving us dependent on external powers when crises erupt. If we take a different path, which is invest in unified security architecture that actively enables prosperity, we build continental defense infrastructure that protects the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation, reduces sovereign risk premiums, attracts patient capital, and positions Africa as architects of our own security rather than consumers of others' protection. The United African Defense Force, financed through the African Sovereign Development Trust, is not merely a defense initiative. It is the strategic cornerstone of Africa's sovereign economic transformation. It is the investment that makes all other investments possible. It is the foundation upon which the African Continental Free Trade Area delivers actual prosperity, not merely aspirational frameworks. It is a security architecture that enables Africa to claim its inevitable role as the next global growth frontier. What we are asking for is fourfold. First, endorsement of the United African Defense Force framework principles. Your institution's formal acknowledgement that continental security integration deserves mutual economic interest and deserves serious consideration with national and regional strategic planning. Second, commitment to pilot integration phase participation. Your designation of institutional liaisons who will engage with Phase 1 implementation planning, contribute expertise to operational doctrine development, and participate in pilot program assessment. Third, engagement with the African Sovereign Development Trust financing structure. Your institution's willingness to explore asset-backed security instruments, sovereign bond mechanisms, and alternative financing models that move beyond traditional donor dependency whilst maintaining fiduciary responsibility. Fourth, ongoing dialogue and institutional coordination. This symposium is the beginning, not conclusion. We seek your commitment to continued engagement as United African Defense Force framework evolves from conceptual architecture to operational reality. This is not a request for immediate capital. This This is an invitation to co-architect the security infrastructure that makes African prosperity inevitable. Our conclusion: the secure foundation for Africa's century. The data is clear, the precedents are proven, the choice is stark. Integrated security frameworks unlock investment at scale. Fragmented arrangements perpetuate vulnerability and missed potential. The United African Defense Force, capitalized through the African Sovereign Development Trust, represent the foundational security architecture that enables everything else this symposium seeks to achieve, which is interoperability between sovereign African states that will not only improve efficiency in rapid response, but also bolster savings in defense spending. Economic integration without security integration is aspiration without foundation. Development finance without asset protection is investment into perpetual vulnerability. Continental prosperity without continental defense is hope without infrastructure. We are offering the infrastructure. The question is not whether Africa needs unified defense architecture. The question is whether we will build it deliberately whilst we have institutional momentum, political will, and global capital alignment, or whether we will watch fragmentation make it impossible whilst other regions capture opportunities that should be ours. As we move into the next 3 years, Africa's economy will enter an expansion phase that demands readiness. We must be prepared to protect our land, to foster a unified African maritime border backed by coordinated naval forces and port authorities, and to work seamlessly with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement to bolster Pan-African unity. The maritime domain deserves particular attention. Our coastlines stretch over 26,000 kilometers, yet remain inadequately protected and poorly coordinated. A unified African maritime border, ratified by all coastal nations and enforced through integrated naval cooperations, would transform our relationship with the seas from vulnerability to strategic advantage. It would protect fishing rights worth billions annually, secure offshore energy infrastructure, combat piracy that raises insurance costs for all African commerce, and establish sovereign control over our exclusive economic zones. The choice is ours. The moment is now. The foundation we build today determines the prosperity we enable tomorrow. I want to close this with observation. In 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African nation to gain independence. Kwame Nkrumah declared that Ghana's independence was meaningless unless it was linked with the total liberation of the African continent. 68 years later, we have political independence. Now we must build security independence. Economic independence follows security infrastructure as inevitably as harvest follows planting. We are planting today what our children will harvest tomorrow. We are building today what our grandchildren will inherit. We are choosing today whether Africa writes its own security architecture or remains subject to architectures written by others. The United African Defense Force is Africa choosing to write its own story. Thank you.